Hi, everyone. This is John Daly. I'm here with the Daly Express for day two of the Principles First Summit in Washington, D.C. Things wrapped up a couple of hours ago. It was a long day, as they usually go at this annual summit. The organizers like to fit a lot into the weekend. One noticeable difference between last year's event and this one, besides the venue being different and the ballroom being larger to accommodate everyone, was that there was a lot more security. There were metal detectors along with more security guards than I had seen in the past. And I think a big reason for that is that a lot of people in the MAGA media were really drawing a lot of attention to this year's event. And not in a good way. But by design, Principles First is held in Washington, D.C. at the same time as CPAC. That's Matt Schlapp's annual gathering. So there's already some tension there between the two, but with a number of podcasters and even Fox News personalities taking aim at Principles First this year for whatever reason. I guess the organizers wanted to play things safe, and it turned out to be a good idea actually because the leader of the Proud Boys, Enrique Torrio, I think is his name, and some other Proud Boys. Enrique was recently pardoned by Donald Trump after initially being sentenced to prison for 22 years for a seditious conspiracy over January 26th. Well, he apparently showed up inside the hotel, I guess, trying to stir things up. He was actually arrested at the Capitol just a day or two earlier over some skirmish. He apparently can't get enough of that place. But yeah, he did get, I'm not sure the details entirely, but it sounds like they got escorted out of the hotel. Sort of an interesting occurrence. Some further irony along those lines. Some of you may know Michael Fanone, the former Capitol police officer. He was almost killed on January 6th. He suffered some serious injuries. He was actually heading security, or he is actually heading security here at Principles First. I thought that was interesting. I guess that's what he does now, is security. He was also a speaker at the event, along with other prominent January 6th police officers, which I'll talk about a little bit later in this episode. I did get some interviews in with I talked to Noah Rothman of National Review, Stephen Hayes of the Dispatch. I'm a big fan of both men. I'll be airing those interviews in this episode, but since I had pretty good seats at the event and the audio in the ballroom seemed to be working well, I figured I'd also air some thoughts from some of the speakers as well during their segments, including people like Chris Christie, the aforementioned January 6th police officers, Gary Kasparov, Russian dissident, champion chess player. So I hope you enjoy this episode. I'm going to start things off with some words from Heath Mayo. He's the founder of Principles First, and then I'll sort of intro each segment after that. So here we go.
Authoritarians, you don't need me to tell you, authoritarians are on the march all around the world, and yet we have a president of the United States carrying their water, claiming just this week that the Ukrainians started this war. And we also have a vice president who went to Munich and stood before Europe and Ukraine to lecture the Ukrainians about why war is bad and they just need to stop fighting. What are they thinking? They just need to just stop. Let's be clear. Every Ukrainian is defending their families, their homes, their lives on their land. Their kids have been killed. Their hospitals bombed, their fields destroyed. The Ukrainians are not fighting just to fight President Trump, J.D. Vance. They are fighting for survival. And all the death and expense would stop today if Putin would pull his cannon fodder troops out of Ukraine. But Putin does not care about the senseless slaughter of all of those innocent lives. Instead of lecturing Putin on the human costs of his war, this administration has the gall to lecture Ukraine. And now we'll meet with Putin without any Ukrainian buy-in to negotiate what I'm sure will be some capitulation that the Ukrainians would rather die than accept. It is sickening to me as an American to hear what we have heard in recent weeks, and I hope it is sickening to all of you, because it is completely anathema to every moral value that I thought that my country believed in.
Ukraine was a big topic at in today's discussions, and for good reason. The old GOP, Reagan's GOP, I believe would have been a strong ally to Ukraine, but in recent days, President Trump has blamed Ukraine for starting the war with Russia and being the aggressor in the conflict. That's ridiculous, of course. So I'm going to play some clips of people commenting on that topic, beginning with two of Trump's 2024 presidential primary opponents, former Governor Chris Christie and former Governor Asa Hutchinson. After Hutchinson, there'll be Gary Kasparov. He's the world-famous chess player and an outspoken Russian dissident. Then I'm going to talk to Noah Rothman, again of National Review, about the same topic, Ukraine. At the end of that interview with Noah, we transitioned over to the economy. But let's start with Chris Christie. I said he would be first. I didn't quite catch in the video clip the question he was asked by Steve Hayes in his segment. Basically, Steve asked him if Donald Trump's posture on Ukraine amounted to the U.S. actually switching sides and joining Russia on that issue. So here we go.
There's a lot there, but the answer in short is yes. But we didn't just switch sides. I mean, look, anybody who was paying attention during the 24 campaign knew this was what was going to happen. I mean, I was the only presidential candidate besides Joe Biden who went to Ukraine during the campaign. And it wasn't easy to get there. It was a 24-hour trip to get there during wartime. But I felt like it was incredibly important to go and to see it for myself. And I traveled around the country, went to different places where the Russians had invaded, spoke to the local people there about what happened when the Russians came in, the atrocities they engaged in, saw visual evidence of it, photographs, etc., and then met with President Zelensky for over an hour in the Capitol. And he asked me at that time, what did I think was going to happen? And I said, look, I don't know, that's why we run these things, but if Trump wins, I said, you're in big trouble. And I said, you need to be using your influence now to make clear that that's an unacceptable alternative to the Ukrainian people.
What did he say in response? And wouldn't he plausibly want to respond to, hey, look, I don't want to meddle in your politics?
He was smart about it. He just nodded and nodded, and then he smiled, and then he winked, and said nothing that could be quoted by anybody in the room that would be able to put him in a bad spot. But I think, and I blame him very little for not having done it, given that he's the president of a country that was relying upon us to try to help him defeat someone who had invaded him.
What explains his solicitous behavior toward Vladimir Putin, which started a long time before that?
Because he wants to be Vladimir Putin. That explains his solicitous conduct to Putin, to Kim Jong-un, to Erdogan, to Xi.
I knew whenever he says he wants to end the Ukraine-Russian conflict within 24 hours, the only way you do that is to give Putin what he wants. And that I warned about that at the time, and that is coming not just to happen, but at an accelerated pace. And and a method that enhances the power of the dictator and rewards Russia for their bad conduct. And whenever I look at the United States of America and our history of building goodwill with our allies and having the relationships for our Western democracies that value freedom, value sovereignty, and value partnerships, that is being eroded today. And instead of it being an America First agenda, it becomes an America Alone agenda. And that is not good for our country.
Because, by the way, what company benefited most from Ukrainian war? Who is the largest contractor of Pentagon today? Quickly? No, Palantir. Who is the biggest shareholder of Palantir? Peter Thiel. Who is his protege? J.D. Vance. So I think General should shut up, because his donor is the biggest beneficiary of that war. Elon Musk, let's start counting, I mean, he's also a big beneficiary. The Starlink had a small portion of internet, now it's much bigger. So they are beneficial of the war, and they're trying to tell us, oh yeah, let's stop this war. It's not about offering peace. It's, okay, you can definitely stop the war if you capitulate. They're forcing Ukraine to capitulate. They're attacking Zelensky because he's taking a stand with his nation. He stayed in Kyiv knowing that if Russians would take in Kyiv, he would be killed. So I think that as of today, we are in a very, very difficult situation because, again, as I said, I was in Munich. Europeans are shocked. Okay, they have their share of blame for being, complacent, for not spending enough. But now, after so many decades of being part of alliance, and by the way, they were faithful members of alliance. They sent troops to Afghanistan. So 1/3 of the victims of casualties in Afghanistan were from Europe. And now is just being attacked. So I think we should accept this harsh reality that America today is playing. When we talk about ice hockey, has changed the teams. Ukraine loses, that means Russia wins. Putin wins. So there are obviously some grades of Putin's victory, but let's say he keeps even the territories that he controls now, even these territories. Now, then next question is whether these territorial gains will be recognized. I doubt very much that Trump can force even this Senate to recognize them, but he doesn't have to. One of the provisions of this colonial agreement he's forcing upon Ukraine implies that American companies can operate on the occupied territories, which will be equal to recognition. So the victory will save Putin from disaster because Russian economy is on the verge of collapse now. He can't continue the war for more than a year. Now, it's as every economist who is analyzing the data can tell you that Russia, and it's even if there are no more sanctions imposed, and there's so many ways, that you can basically force Russian economy into collapse much sooner. And it will dramatically raise his international status. He will be back in business. Even if he's not joining G7, I think it's impossible because Europeans will not do that. That means the end of G7, that means the end of NATO, and we'll see what happens with the European Union. Probably it will also collapse. There will be probably, very likely, a new defense alliance in the eastern border of European Union, northeastern bloc, so the Baltic nations, Poles, probably Czechs, Finland, Sweden. I guess, the Britain may join. The Europeans already discussed whether the British and French nukes would offer sufficient deterrence against Russia. That's a discussion that took place 10 days ago, a week ago in Munich. They're not so sure yet, but they may have no chance. And Putin will continue the policy of I think more like a hybrid war, Because there's also a myth, there's this, as Trump said, oh, if Putin wanted, he would have taken hold of Ukraine. Yes, Putin wanted to take hold of Ukraine. Yeah, he did. Yeah, again, I'm not telling you that Putin's plan was to take Ukraine. He has been saying it. But you don't have to, to invent things. Simply listen. People always ask me, how did you know that Putin will do this or that? I said, I listened to him. Because, dictators, they're always lie about what they've done, but very often they tell you exactly what they're going to do. Mein Kampf was published in 1925 and was a blueprint. But in 1925, Hitler was nobody. The leader of a small nationalistic party. Putin, when he said in 2005, on April 25th, 2005, for speaking before Russian Duma and Russian Senate, the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. He was already president of Russia. He was already commanding massive resources, both military and economic and financial, of course. So Putin was never secret about his plans. You cannot blame him for hiding it. So Russian propaganda for 24/7 saying Ukraine as a state doesn't exist. Ukrainian nation doesn't exist. I'm not telling you. They have been saying that. And pretending you don't hear that, okay, he says, well, he did. So that's why ending the war on Putin terms means that he will continue his policy of destruction of Ukraine, and then hybrid war means that he'll start putting pressure. He doesn't have to attack Baltic nations or Poland, but he can continue doing what he has been doing for a long time, buying influence. There's so many political parties in Europe on his payroll, and there'll be more pressure. And these small nations will have to deal with Putin, knowing that America is no longer playing, on their side, but on the other side.
Okay, everyone, I'm here with someone I'm a big fan of. This is Noah Rothman from National Review. He was interviewing Asa Hutchinson on stage just a little while ago. Noah, thanks for being on the Daly Express.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you've written a lot about Ukraine. I think you and I are very much in sync on this. Do you, the crazy stuff that we've seen with the administration, the posture they've taken, do you consider this, as some people have, that it really is America switching sides in this conflict?
That may be a premature assessment. I'm very discomfited by the signals that we've seen from this administration, and it does invert the process of Trump negotiation that we're supposed to be familiar with, which is stick, carrot, right? Completely inverted when it comes to Moscow. Moscow's already been granted dispensations by removing Joe Biden's diplomatic isolation with this meeting in Riyadh. That's a concession, whether they know it or not. On top of that, reintegration into the global community, reopening of consular offices as though that's necessary. It's not. Deconfliction channels have not shut down. This is something that no one was saying until 2 weeks ago for a reason. And then, of course, the patina of legitimacy that the West would provide, the territorial acquisitions that Russia has made by force at the end of this whole process. It's all carrot, and still Putin asks more. Still, they ask for non-alignment for a post-war Ukraine, a demilitarization of Ukraine, stuff that should be unacceptable on its face. And you wonder where the president is going to finally meet this moment at which he can no longer accept the asks that he's being made. He doesn't seem to have that moment, which leads you to conclude that they want the agreement more than they want the peace. And I think that's just where we're at. I think they want the agreement. They don't care what it looks like. They want to say peace in our time and point to that and say success. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're joining the other side of this conflict. It does mean that we're paring back our commitments to our partners and allies abroad, which is just as bad. We shouldn't, need to inflate that to be more of a moral calumny than it already is. It's bad enough. We could get there, but this isn't very encouraging.
What do you think this, and I got to switch this microphone back and forth because it's kind of loud in here, folks, but what do you think? A lot of people link what's going on with Russia and Ukraine to what's going on with China and Taiwan. Do you see those things as linked? Do you see, I know the world is watching and how we're handling Ukraine. Do you think this really puts other allies in a bad position?
Yeah, I do. The Ukraine war is a proxy war for a global conflict waged by America's adversaries to overturn the U.S.-led world order. point blank. You have to engage in weird intellectual dexterity and efforts to convince yourself otherwise when you look at the playing field. Moscow is aligned with Iran. Moscow provides Iran with diplomatic cover for its operations and for its terrorist proxies, and Iran provides it with drones and weapons and munitions. The North Koreans are supporting the Russians materially with artillery shells and weapons components, and now fighters on the battlefield fighting Ukrainian soldiers. China provides dual-use components for Moscow, as well as trains with its military, and generally supports its adventurism abroad. And China receives a lot of energy and its primary exports from Moscow. All of these powers have combined into something resembling an axis aligned against U.S.-led interests and our partners on the front lines in the Pacific and in Europe. I find it difficult to see anything other than the outlines emerging of a great power conflict that we should all hope to avert. How do you avert it? By preventing these ambitious, irredentist in many ways regimes from securing their interests abroad at the expense of our own. If you take one chess piece off the board, it's not coming back. It's a zero-sum game. We know that when it comes to Iran, for example. If we were to knock out Hamas or Hezbollah, that's one less terrorist entity we'd have to deal with. Likewise, if Moscow takes Ukraine off the board, that's one less ally for the United States, one less partner for the United States, and to say nothing of the insecurity that it would impose on our treaty-bound allies on the frontier, the Baltic states, Poland, and Romania, who will get very nervous if they start seeing Russian troops approaching the border and may go their own way, may take care of their own security interests, perhaps against our wishes or the alliance's wishes. That's a very dangerous situation. Introduces so many variables that we can't control and prospects for a conflagration that we just simply don't see coming because we're no longer prima inter pares. That's in the near term, that's my biggest concern.
I just wanted to ask you one more question. I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you for joining me. On domestic policy, so everybody I know that was sort of on the fence, not really on the fence, but really having a hard time deciding who to vote for in the November election, really, they told me that they eventually voted for Trump because they thought he would bring down the cost of consumer goods, the inflation issue.
They tell you how?
They don't. No, I mean that's an excellent point because there was that famous meme going around about some of you didn't look up what tariffs are and it shows. But do you think? I mean, he's obviously not doing anything to bring down prices. He's actually his tariff war is going to drive prices up. Do you see him facing any kind of political backlash, or do you think he just got elected to 4 years? Does he care at this point?
Yeah, no, there will absolutely be a political backlash. Donald Trump's job number one, according to the polling when he was elected, is to bring consumer costs down. Job number two is something he's very much seen to, focus on border security and restoring some kind of sanity to the American immigration regime. That he's got pretty much locked in, and voters appreciate that. We already see indications in polling that the general public doesn't believe he has his eye on the ball when it comes to consumer prices, and a plurality of Republicans now agree. And that's a huge risk for this president. It's not as though he has a ton of tools in the arsenal to bring down consumer prices. He can make things a lot worse. But the problem with inflation, why you never want it, is because the only remedy to inflation is pain. It is going to be painful for all consumers, and you just have to let it pass. The worse the pain, the faster it goes. That's shock therapy. And the president can arrest that. He's applying a lot of pressure to the Fed to be less independent than it already is. He wants interest rates down. Who doesn't? And now he wants to send people stimulus checks that will be probably very inflationary. The political impulse is to provide relief to consumers in ways that make an inflation problem worse. And he's very tempted by that. But just like Joe Biden was not blamed for the pandemic, but was blamed for everything that came downstream of the pandemic, increasing crime, increasing consumer costs, all the disruption to the supply chain. He couldn't escape blame for that, even if nobody directly blamed him for COVID. The same thing could apply to Donald Trump, where people say, well, he inherited these high prices. We don't really blame him for that. But the manifestations of those high prices, they will resent, and that resentment will fall on the president's shoulders. So Trump and MAGA should be very aware that is job number one, and he's not seeing to it.
Well, thank you very much, Noah. That was great insight. I appreciate you taking some time for me here at Principles First. I enjoyed your interview with Asa Hutchinson. I'll probably play a little bit of that on the podcast too, but I thought it was very insightful. Have a great day. Thank you. Next, Asa Hutchinson answers some questions from Noah Rothman on Doge and Elon Musk. Some of you might find this interesting.
The thing that it has done well is scandalize the country, and the Republican Party in particular, around the sort of stuff that the GAO does on an annual basis. It's something of a redundancy, which doesn't spell, success for a project that is supposed to eliminate redundancies from the federal government. Nevertheless, scandalizing around stuff, getting rid of bloat, waste, good. At the same time, the man is incredibly inconstant, a reckless communicator online, capricious to a degree that is off-putting, and in my view, risks undermining the popularity, or at least making people skeptical of, the cause of limited government. Is Doge and Elon Musk a net benefit or detriment to small government conservatism?
I think the verdict is still out on that particular point. But what is clear is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk have a lot of things in common, and one of them is they're full of conflicts of interest in the work that they're doing. And so, I think America is still studying Elon Musk on this, and there's a lot that America likes when it comes to trying to deflate a bloated bureaucracy, but they're also coming to the conclusion that the common concern of individuals is being disregarded. I reduced, as governor of Arkansas, state government employment by 3,000 workers, which is a 14% reduction over 8 years. That's a significant reduction in the state bureaucracy. Now, the key thing though is I didn't fire anyone. We set up a hiring freeze. We didn't bring people in when they left. We said, can we do this more efficiently? And so there's ways to shrink the federal bureaucracy without trampling on human dignity.
As I mentioned, there was a discussion with 4 of the Capitol police officers who fought insurrectionists on January 6th as they were protecting the Capitol. One of them, as I mentioned, was Michael Fanone. He was asked how he has adjusted since that day. Again, he almost lost his life on January 6th. That's something a lot of people forget. And he, since then, has seen Donald Trump let off the hook politically for that. He has seen his actual assailants pardoned for the crimes against him. So he had some strong thoughts.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when it's time to be outraged and angry, I'm outraged and angry. But I keep my world very small. I've got very limited interactions with people other than my immediate family. And so, when I'm not out here doing things like this, I'm spending time with my kids, just being a girl dad, and keeping it close, so to speak. Making my world as small as humanly possible. But it ain't easy. When the election was over, I really did feel like, okay, listen, I did my best. I spoke out. I told the truth about my experiences and the experiences of so many other police officers on January 6th. And I warned America about, the dangers of making this choice that they've made. They didn't listen, so fuck them. And I'm gonna go back to living my life, being a father, and and then Donald Trump pardoned 1,500 insurrectionists, hundreds of violent criminals who assaulted police officers at the Capitol on January 6th, police officers like you see up here on the stage today, but hundreds of other police officers who, regardless of their political ideology, were doing their fucking job. Donald Trump sent them there to assault those individuals, and he pardoned them. He pardoned them. And I'll tell you why he pardoned them. He pardoned them because he wants people to know that if you commit crimes on his behalf, he's got your back. And so now what we have in this country is we have Donald Trump's personal brown shirt militia. We have the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, and the Proud Boys, who are no different than the brown shirts of the neo-Nazi era. And they are operating under the assumption that if they commit violent criminal acts on Donald Trump's behalf, that he will pardon them for future violence. And so I understand people's fear, but don't skip over the outrage and the anger and go straight to fear. You know, listen, I'm fearful. I don't know what Donald Trump might do. I don't know what the fuck Cash Patel might do. And I don't know what this clown Ed Martin, who's now the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, might do. These are insurrectionists. Let's be very clear. Yes, fucking traitors. And they're running the show. Those of us that love democracy and American freedoms and are true patriots are now, unfortunately, in the minority of those who are politically active in this country. But we need to hold on to the outrage and hold on to the anger and set aside the fear in knowing that there are millions of us who are all like-minded, who all feel the outrage and the anger and a little bit of the fear. But if we all stick together and stand up against this tyranny in this country, that I believe that we have the opportunity or the ability to overcome it. And I'm not an optimistic person. You know, I think I went on for a minute.
No, that was great.
Lastly, on today's episode, I talked to Stephen Hayes of the Dispatch. I love the Dispatch. It's a great publication. I say that in my interview. I'm a huge fan of them. We talked about the state of the media, including one of his former employees, Fox News, and I thought it was a nice little discussion. Okay, I'm here with a special guest right now. This is Stephen Hayes from the Dispatch. He's the co-founder and the lead man in charge. I am a big fan of the Dispatch for lots of reasons. I wanted to actually just talk to you, Steve, about what, you know, I write for Bernie Goldberg's website, and I think we have a lot of readers there who'd be interested in what the Dispatch has to offer for those who aren't familiar with it. Can you talk about your mission and the kind of work you do there?
Yeah, of course. I'm a longtime reader of Bernie's and fan of his work. And, you know, I think if you look at what Bernie was saying and doing years and years ago, if my colleagues, my friends in the mainstream media had been paying more careful attention to what Bernie was saying then, they might have made some adjustments and we wouldn't be in the sort of crisis that we are today with, you know, the lowest trust of all time in the media and this rise of, you know, a media that's not even a media, particularly on the right, that's not even, that isn't first concerned with reporting facts, truth, the things that sort of everybody in the media at one time believed in. So the Dispatch, we started about 5.5 years ago. I had helped run the Weekly Standard before that. And early in my tenure as editor of the Weekly Standard, I reached out to Jonah Goldberg and tried to get him to join me at the Weekly Standard from National Review. He declined, but when we have a billionaire owner at the Weekly Standard who decided he was going to shut us down, and when he decided to shut us down, and in part because of arguments that we were making about Donald Trump and the reporting that we were doing about the Trump administration, I called Jonah again and I said, look, I'm going to start something new. You have any interest in start something new? And Jonah has long believed in William F. Buckley's admonition to be institution builders. And so he was tempted by that, and we, you know, started raising money and launched the Dispatch in October of 2019. So it's been going for 5.5 years. We've had a blast doing it. We're up to a staff of about 30 today. And what we tell people we do is we cover politics, policy, and culture informed by conservative principles. And we do a lot of original reporting. We care about facts. We don't believe that there are liberal facts or conservative facts or alternative facts. We just believe that there are facts, and we do our very best to uncover them. And then we have some people who do analysis and commentary as well. We have I think some of the best writers and analysts in the country today, and a terrific group of reporters, some of them young, some of them older now. And I'm getting back into the game. I haven't been doing a lot of reporting and writing over the past 5.5 years as I've worked on sort of building up the business, but I'm back into the reporting side, and I'm excited to do it.
One thing that I really appreciate about the Dispatch, I've stopped watching cable news a while ago because it's just bonkers. But so much of it, a breaking story will come along, or you'll hear a tidbit, somebody will say something, and it goes out on cable news. It ends up not being true.
Right.
What I really like about the Dispatch, you guys have this morning Dispatch. It comes out every morning. It really, you're not like trying to jump to be the first to get some breaking news out there. You take a step back, you look at it, you analyze it. Is this correct? I really appreciate that. Is that something you see? It's obviously something you've seen a market for.
Yeah.
Other people getting sick of cable news. Cable news is sort of slowly dying. Fox News still does monster ratings, but the audience is sort of going away. And do you see yourself as being in a position to kind of pick up some of those people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends. I fully buy your argument about there being a market for sort of slower, more thoughtful news. And I would like to think that some of the people who are, frustrated with Fox News would come and find us. Certainly, some of the people, Jonah and I were both employed by Fox News until the fall of 2021 when we left, in part over a Tucker Carlson documentary that was basically fake news about January 6th. What we've heard from a lot of former Fox News viewers who have said, I got to the point where I didn't trust the things I was being told. And, as we saw from some of the documents that came out of the Dominion lawsuit, you have some people on Fox who are regularly saying things in private that are different from, and in some ways the opposite of, the things that they're saying in public. So it's a strange news moment. It's a strange news environment. We were pretty early on this trend that sort of journalism academics are calling slow news. There's a company out of England called Tortoise Media, probably more center left. We're center right, of course, and they've been doing this slow news for a while. And the basic idea is just as you described: take a beat. Take a minute. You don't need to be first. You don't need to have a hot take. You don't need to rush to condemn somebody before we even know the basic facts of a matter. So we've really taken that to heart, and we do that as often as we can. And sometimes it results in, our daily newsletter, the Morning Dispatch. We have a sort of a free version that's a shorter version that people can just sign up for and don't have to pay us. Then we have a longer version that includes a lot of our original reporting. But it's not uncommon for me to have said to our editors there, our reporters there, take another day on this.
Yeah.
Wait a day. And so it might be something that you'll read about in the New York Times or see on Fox News on a Wednesday, and you'll read about it in the Dispatch on a Friday. And we think that what we do in the intervening 2 days is not only make the extra call, there's the journalistic adage to always make the extra call. We make 10 extra calls. And we really want people to help provide us with depth and context so that our readers and our members leave the stuff that we do with deeper understanding. We're not in the outrage game. There's a lot today, I think, to be outraged about, but we're not ginning up outrage to try to monetize it. If people get outraged because of the stuff we report, fair enough. As I say, there are reasons to be outraged, but that's not the game we're in. We're in the news business. We want people to actually understand. So we try to do a lot more light than heat, and we take the time to spend the extra day or 2 days or some days, sometimes a week, reporting stuff out.
One question regarding Fox, and I'll ask one more about Fox News. I don't know if you know this or not, readers, most people listening to this would probably know this, but Bernie Goldberg, who was a Fox News employee as well, he was a contributor, longtime contributor, one of the biggest draws at one time during the O'Reilly Factor, once a week.
He and I did some segments together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he was criticizing Trump. They took him off the air, waited 11 months for his contract to expire, and he was gone. You guys left on principle, but before that, you guys were when I say you guys, you and Jonah is who I'm talking about, being taken less. You were on the air less and less,
Sure.
I think by design. Do you see? I don't think there's really. I mean, you see like Guy Benson. There's a few Trump critics that Fox still seems to tolerate on their
Yeah.
commentary wing. Do you ever see? Before Trump leaving office, I guess maybe things become easier at that point. But do you see any sort of room on that network for like a Trump critical conservative voice like yours?
Um, I mean, being blunt, no, I don't. Look, I mean, again, if you go back and this is not me telling tales out of school, but go back and look at the documents that emerged from the Dominion lawsuit, and I think really allowed us to see sort of the not only sort of how things work inside of Fox, but how people think inside of Fox. And so many of the messages that we saw involved people on air anchors, top executives, the owners, talking about making the audience happy, pleasing the audience. Like, I'm not in the audience pleasing business. I mean, I hope that what we do at the Dispatch, I hope people like what we do, but I'm not at all concerned about writing something that most of the members, maybe all of the people at the Dispatch, don't like if I think it's true. Because I think the sort of bargain that we're making or the bet that we're making is people will care in the long term a lot more about our intellectual honesty than they will about any given particular issue. And that's what we're trying to do. We're in the trust business ultimately. And I think if you look at what Fox is doing, there's so many people on Fox who are, sort of do fan service and are looking to please the crowd. And look, I mean, I will take you behind the scenes a little bit. I used to be a regular on Special Report with Brett Baird. Brett's a longtime friend. He's a good journalist. I was on with Charles Krauthammer a lot. We had a really good group, Juan Williams, A.B. Stoddard. It was a fun mix. I had a great time doing it. But as you say, I was not on as much once Trump started rising in the polls and was taken off of primetime programs and everything. And, part of me is, hey, Fox owns the network. They can do what they want.
Right.
When I was on the panel, though, you'd be on sometimes with panelists, and I would say this was increasingly true as we got into sort of the Trump era. And you do one panel, and then there's a commercial break, and then you do another panel, then there's a commercial break, and usually they had like a cutaway shot right before 7 p.m. And the number of times that you'd finish a panel and you'd go to commercial, and some of my co-panelists would quickly check Twitter. Like, what's the reaction? Do people love what I said?
Right.
And look,
It's a high.
I did it myself, right? So I'm criticizing myself in this. I quickly learned, maybe not as quickly as I'd hope, I learned that was corrosive, that you can sort of play to the crowd. And there's one time in particular, I need to go back and like look up the actual details of this because I try to be pretty even-handed. I try not to do a lot of the shouty stuff. I spend a lot of time reporting. I try to deal in facts rather than outrage. But there was a report that Rutgers University had canceled a scheduled speech by Condoleezza Rice. And whatever the reasoning was, they read a statement from the university, and it was total BS. Like, absolutely ridiculous to have done it, the way that they explained it, caving to political pressure. And I was genuinely angry. And so I think it was Brett was probably anchoring, asked me about it. And it was very clear. I thought that was terrible, and I was really angry about it.
Right.
And I, checked Twitter notifications after that. There's this explosion of people, my followers went up, the responses I got, yeah, you get them, it's our... And, on a human level, you get that kind of affirmation, that kind of adulation. And I think most people think I'd like more of that.
Yeah.
And I think, as I recall, we talked about it another day, maybe the next day, maybe a couple days later. And in my head, I was thinking like, okay, the tougher I am, the more people are going to like this, right? And as I say, like, I recognized what was happening. I stopped it. I didn't do that. It wasn't my practice.
Right.
But like, it's very easy to see how you can do that. I'll make one more quick point.
Sure.
The other thing, at Fox is you also know what's going to get you more airtime. You know what the producers want.
Right.
And I was on television for long enough at that time. I wasn't terribly concerned with how many days a week I was on. I wasn't paid by appearance, which some people are, not just at Fox, but at CNN and MSNBC and elsewhere. So I didn't care much if I was on television a lot.
Right.
But younger people who are just getting a start in the business, they really do care about being on television. Like a lot of people, sadly, a lot of people at television come to sort of think of their own personal self-worth by how much they're on television in a way that really sort of distorts rational thinking. And you can see, if you know what the producers want and you know what's going to get you invited back, that you start just giving the producers what they want. And then the final point I'll make on this is some people are paid per appearance. If you get $250 or $500 an appearance or something like that, then it's not just, I want to be on TV more, so I'm going to say what the producers want. It's, if you're paid $500 an appearance and you get to the point where you used to be on once a month and you're suddenly on once a day, like every day, that's $2,500 a week.
Yeah.
It's $10,000 a month. It's $120,000 a year. It's very easy to see people who say, not just because I want to be on TV, I want to be famous, who say like, that's a really good salary. If I didn't have any other job, that's a really, really good salary. So there are all of these things that I think combine to create this environment. It's particularly true in cable news, where truth and facts and reality come second. And getting an audience, making people mad, getting people to buy products from the advertisers ultimately comes to be the main thing. And that's a corrosive environment.
Yeah, I agree. Rage equals ratings there, but you're not going to get rage at the Dispatch. It's very measured, very complete, and I very much appreciate it. I'm a premium member. I would recommend anybody to check it out, subscribe, become a paying member. It's definitely worth it. So thanks again, Steve, for
John,
talking to
anytime.
me.
Yeah, appreciate
All right,
it.
take care. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, tomorrow is the last day of the event, and I'll be back then with some more stuff for you all on the Daly Express. Until then, take care, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.